The sky seemed to weep along with everyone that gray morning. Among sad faces and lost gazes, a small white crib drew attention. In it, Gabriel, a baby of only a few months, slept unaware that on that day the world around him would change forever. His parents had passed away in a tragic car accident on the wet road. No close relatives were prepared for such a responsibility, except for Marcos and Helena, his paternal aunt and uncle. Without a second thought, they took custody of the boy, determined, or so it seemed, to give him a new chance at happiness. Marcos was a simple man, a construction worker. With a heart bigger than his calloused hands, he saw Gabriel as a gift left by his brother. Helena, on the other hand, had accepted the boy reluctantly, swallowing words of disappointment to keep up appearances. In the first few months, everything seemed to go well. Gabriel was a calm baby with big, curious eyes. Marcos did what he could to be present, even though work consumed his precious hours. Helena took care of him during the day, but little by little, small actions went unnoticed. The forgotten milk, the dirty crib, the ignored cries. As Gabriel grew, things worsened. Helena, irritated by the new routine, took out her frustration on the boy. She called him a burden, said he should have never been born. It was when Marcos left that the real monsters came out of the shadows. Without understanding what was happening, Gabriel learned that the world could be a cold place. Every time Helena ignored him or mistreated him, he shrank further into himself, seeking shelter within. In the rare moments when Marcos was home, Gabriel would offer a shy smile, clinging to him like a safe harbor. Marcos, tired from long days of work, saw the boy's behavior as mere shyness or a consequence of losing his parents. "It's normal," he would tell himself, trying to dismiss the growing discomfort in his chest. But Gabriel's silent pain was like an invisible crack, growing larger each day. And soon it would be impossible to ignore. Time passed, and Gabriel, now 5 years old, already understood, even if he couldn't put it into words, that love and fear often walked hand in hand. In public, Helena presented herself as a caring aunt. She smiled, made a point of showing up at school meetings, and brought cakes to neighborhood parties. But when the eyes of others dissipated, all that remained was the cruel coldness with which she treated her nephew. It was in the small details that the truth hid: the purple cut on his arm that appeared while playing, the fleeting gaze when someone asked if everything was okay, the irrational fear of doing something wrong. Marcos, however, caught up in debts, double shifts at work, and his own grief over the loss of his brother, didn't clearly see what was unfolding under his own roof. However, the heart of a good man always feels what reason tries to ignore. One night, arriving home tired from work, Marcos found Gabriel sleeping on the sofa, clutching a small rag doll that was already torn from so much use. As he lifted the pajama sleeve to cover him, he saw marks on the thin little arm. A tight squeeze in his chest made him lose his breath for a moment. He must have fallen while playing, he murmured to himself, trying to dismiss the suspicion that was growing like a shadow. But the signs became impossible to hide. Gabriel, once shy, now seemed apathetic. His voice was almost inaudible, his little eyes always seemed on alert. His smile, rare, only appeared when Marcos held out his hand or pulled him into a tight hug. It was on a late afternoon, rainy like the one on which Gabriel had lost his parents, that the truth came to light. Marcos, released early from work because of the bad weather, decided to make a surprise. He would stop by the bakery, buy Gabriel's favorite sweet, and go home. Opening the door without making a sound, he heard Helena's furious voice echoing through the house. "You're good for nothing," she yelled. "Damn the day you entered this house." The sound of something being thrown to the ground made Marcos run inside, his heart pounding in his chest. In the hallway, the scene paralyzed his body. Helena was pushing Gabriel against the wall, her eyes full of hatred, while the boy, small and fragile, just closed his eyes as if he had already given up on reacting. Something inside Marcos broke. It was as if all the doubts, all the fears, everything he hadn't wanted to see, were revealed at once. He felt anger, guilt, and above all, an overwhelming protective love. Without thinking, he crossed the distance between them and in a deep voice shouted, "Stop it now, Helena." Helena, surprised, took a few steps back. Gabriel, still trembling, looked at his uncle with a mixture of fear and hope. At that moment, Marcos knew he could no longer pretend that nothing was happening. A decision needed to be made. And it would be in that instant. The silence that followed seemed heavier than the air itself. Helena stared at Marcos with furious eyes, as if she were the victim of some great injustice. Gabriel, on the other hand, remained still, his face pale, his small hands trembling at his sides. Marcos took a step forward, placing himself between Helena and the boy. Without needing more words, Gabriel felt, for the first time in a long time, that someone was truly on his side. "Pack your things," Marcos said, his voice firm, controlled. "You're not staying in this house anymore." Helena laughed scornfully, trying to maintain control of the situation. "You're going to kick me out because of a brat? A dead weight who isn't even your son?" Those words pierced Marcos's chest like blades. He looked at Gabriel, so small, so fragile, and saw there not just his blood nephew, but a piece of the brother he had loved so much. And more, he saw a child who only needed someone to believe in him. "If protecting a child is a mistake, then I prefer to be wrong every day of my life," Marcos replied without looking away. Helena, without the strength to argue against her husband's firmness, huffed with rage, gathered some clothes in a suitcase and left, slamming the door behind her. There were no goodbyes. No tears on her part. Just a liberating silence that hung over the house. Marcos knelt down in front of Gabriel, who still couldn't believe what he had seen. "You're safe now," Marcos said, his voice choked with emotion, gently holding the boy's face. "I promise. No one will ever hurt you again while I'm here." For the first time in a long time, Gabriel cried. But they weren't tears of pain nor of fear. They were tears of relief. In the days that followed, Marcos dedicated himself entirely to his nephew. He took him to the doctor, enrolled him in therapy sessions, and, most importantly, was present. For every nightmare Gabriel had, Marcos was there. For every new shy smile that appeared, he celebrated it like a victory. The bond between them grew stronger, built on the ruins of pain, but also on the solid foundations of genuine love. Gabriel still had a long road ahead to heal his wounds. But now he knew he was no longer alone. And for the first time he believed he deserved to be loved. The years passed like the seasons, each one bringing its own pain, its own healings, and finally its own fruits. Gabriel grew up under Marcos's watchful and loving eye. Every gesture, every word of encouragement was a small seed planted in the boy's wounded heart. Little by little, the frightened child gave way to a determined young man, full of dreams and a quiet hope. School, which had once been a source of fear, became his refuge. Gabriel excelled in his studies, in sports, and especially in the gentle way he treated everyone around him. The pain he had suffered did not harden him. On the contrary, it made him more sensitive to the suffering of others. Marcos, now with more wrinkles on his face and graying hair, watched each of his nephew's achievements with pride. He never remarried. He didn't feel the need. Gabriel was all he needed. And taking care of him had become the most important mission of his life. On graduation day, the university auditorium was full. Gabriel, dressed in a cap and gown and a radiant smile, went up to the stage to give the valedictorian speech. Holding the paper with slightly trembling hands, he looked for someone in the audience. And there was Marcos, his chest swelling with pride and discreet tears shining in his eyes. Gabriel took a deep breath and spoke. "Many people think that family is something we are born into. I learned that family is who chooses to stay, who chooses to love. Throughout my life I faced many invisible battles. There were moments when the pain seemed greater than hope. But then God put a man in my path. A hero without a cape, without armor. A man who, when everything seemed lost, chose to protect me, to care for me, to love me like a son." Gabriel paused, swallowing his emotion. "Uncle Marcos," he said, his voice choked, "I am who I am today because of you. Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for teaching me that true love is made of daily choices. This diploma, this victory is ours." The auditorium erupted in applause. Many discreetly wiped away tears. But nothing was stronger than what passed between Gabriel and Marcos at that moment. A tight hug, filled with everything that words could never describe. In that hug was the pain, the fear overcome, the sleepless nights, the patience, the struggle, and above all, the love. They had faced the worst. And together they had won. Because blood ties can create a story. But heart ties save lives.